Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. This episode brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Go check them out today. Make sure you turn off the ringer on your cell phone. We're also proud to be on social media. Follow us SWGM Podcast on Twitter, SWGM Podcast on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube. Watch, like, subscribe, share. And we're at the YouTube channel / Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Also, the channel where you can download the show on iTunes. Get the podcast at iTunes, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. And then last but certainly not least, support us and follow us on Patreon. Patreon.com / Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Or SWGM Podcast, pardon me. So tonight's topic, free for all. This is a smorgasbord buffet of topico tonight. And here to discuss it with us, Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Hello.
Dave, the Rules Maven Scott.
What can I say? Please return your tray tables and seats into the upright position and prepare for landing.
Dustin, the Savage Intern Smith.
That's my purse. I don't know you.
So tonight's topic, as we said, free for all. I have a couple things I kind of want to discuss from just some posts I've seen in the community. I don't want to necessarily make it a rant, but I do want to kind of explore it a little bit. It's going to have a little bit of a rant flavor to it. Just be forewarned.
Rant was last week. Weren't you paying attention? It's
still going to have a little bit of, because it's me showing where the RPG rules hurt me on the book. It's testifying into the court thing. So if anybody wants to jump in with just a random topic, also too, if you're watching the show, watching the live stream, and you want to float a topic, feel free to put in the chat. We do monitor that during the show, and we'll include it in the discussion. Bueller.
You get to go first.
I thought you had one you had locked in on.
Well, I do have one locked in, but I want to give everybody else a chance before I monopolize the time. Okay, so
monopolize the time.
Overcomplicated wealth resource system rules in your homebrew.
I feel like we've covered this recently.
I don't think we've covered it recently. We maybe talked about resource management. Kind of like, well, there's this. This comes from a post that I saw recently in the Savage Worlds G Plus community about there being a full die type, skill oriented roll dice kind of system that used to appear on Savage Heroes, but nobody could find the link. No, not for Nemesis is an example of one of them. Okay. But yeah, let's take a look at that. So, I mean, what a lot of it does, and this is, I think it's coming more than anything else from the D20 modern wealth system, quote unquote, where, okay, wealth is now a skill that you purchase at character creation. And like any other skill, you start at a die type of D4. But it costs 2 points per skill point to raise it a die type. The roll doesn't ace. You can't get a wild die with it until you get to a certain level. Then you also have to come up with a lifestyle level, and you make purchase rolls. And I've got to say, we've tried it a couple times in different flavors and variations, and it always just sort of falls flat.
Seems overly complicated.
Yeah, it's overly complicated. It sort of seems to fall flat, and I'm more and more subscribing to the Wiggyism. If anybody has Daring Tales of the Space Lanes, go ahead and read the paragraph on trading rules. It starts with a sentence, there aren't any. It's a dramatic, you just assume the characters have enough money for whatever they need between scenes off screen. And when they don't, oh, look at that, we called it an adventure. Oh shit, you can't pay your docking fees. They're impounding your ship and won't let you leave spaceport. Whatever do you do? Oh, look, here's a man approaching you with a suitcase and a job. It becomes a dramatic and narrative reason for adventuring, because let's face it, nobody sits down to play CPA, the RPG.
Nope. I did not sign on for math.
Yeah, and I've tried. I've done the same thing. I've even tried the system from Nemesis, and inevitably within a couple of sessions it just falls by the wayside because nobody wants to deal with it. Not me, not the players.
Well, and I think too that the other side, the other bite at that apple is that there's already the reason it doesn't work is because it feels like an alien mechanic wedged in to Savage Worlds. It's like somebody pounding a square peg into a round hole. There's already mechanics for that called connection. For example, take the connections edge or the wealth edges, or do a streetwise roll if you're trying to find something that's illegal that you want to purchase.
I think
dramatic task.
To a certain extent, doesn't this fall under the don't try to do what another game system does in the whole,
right?
I just saw a post recently where they were asking, like, what would you savage? And I'm like, I can savage anything, but I would never savage another game. I might savage the setting the game is in, or that world, but I wouldn't savage the game. And I think that's what this is. D20, which it sounds like this guy was basing it off of the D20 Modern Wealth system. D20 is a attrition over time system, so you have to track things like dollars and cents and how many med kits do you have and how many bullets do you have, because it's all about dwindling those resources down to nothing. Savage Worlds is so totally not about that at the end of the day, when you make Savage Worlds about it, it slows everything down. Everything doesn't feel Savage Worlds anymore once you start to do that, because you've lost the fast, furious fun when you go into bean counting.
Right. Well, and then I would also recommend too that let's take a look just real quick at. I mean, there is kind of system in there for it, but you kind of have to dig through the core rule book. If you take a look at the ammo for allied extras rules, that works great as a resource management system. I mean, it's first of all, it's very abstract. It's, well, what's the extras resource group ammo level? Well, it's either very high, low, or out. And you just track it on a sheet. After each fight, the ammo level drops a level. Done. I mean, that's really all the resource management you need in the Savage Worlds if you're going to talk about, for example, ammo or party ammo, if that even matters to you. I mean, your setting, and the reason it may not matter to you is you may be playing a diehard setting where you all have all the ammo ever. Nobody's counting shots.
Well, yeah. Think about
playing a John Woo movie.
Right. Think about the actual Savage World settings we've seen come out. Things like Necessary Evil. How many times do you see the Punisher look down and go, "Oh no, I'm out of clips"?
Right?
When it's dramatically appropriate to push the story forward to the hand-to-hand combat scene, that's when it happens. That's the only time it happens. And lo and behold, when he's out of clips, somehow so's the other guy. I mean, How does that work out? Because it's a narrative thing that you handle. It's not something that should be tied to and take one more off of the list until they're gone.
Right.
I have to say that, plot appropriate use of resource management tends to be the way to go, man. Like, I think it's just hard when you're dealing with folks that come from another game system that are effectively playing a war game with magic, that have this idea of any magical item is equipment. It's our tank, it's our gun. But in Savage Worlds, it's kind of like, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing here? It's pretty much the difference between a D4 and a D6. It's so negligible that you don't even have to calculate gear. Now, there are a couple of settings that right off the bat I can think of that it's very important because it's setting rule based. Two of them. One is Deadlands Noir, and spoiler alert, everybody has the poverty hindrance. And that becomes part of what spurns you forward to engage in the adventure.
Wait. An adventure set during the Great Depression and everybody has the poverty hindrance?
I know!
Right.
Craziness. Aren't we all about pulp?
That's bullshit.
You mean I gotta do stuff so I can afford to eat and live in a building? Yes. And then the other one is Interface 0 2.0. which is a cyberpunk setting, which makes sense because everything is so dang expensive. Like they're polar opposites if you think about it. Noir is you personally don't have enough money to do anything, and Interface Zero is everything
You
else.
gotta work.
Yeah, everything just costs so much. Like you could be playing a straight up doctor. Like the last Interface Zero 2 game I was in, I was playing a doctor, but I had to like patch up mafiosos because it was too expensive to have a regular apartment.
Right. Well, and I think too, this is also part of the problem too. So look at Savage Worlds. You look at the equipment list, it tells you how many bullets go in a gun. Do you track that? I mean, it's kind of implied that you should. It gives you prices for ammo and a rule system for calculating what ammo costs for your weapon. You're limited to the number of shots.
I've never seen anybody record that shit on their character.
No, who records it? What about quarrels from arrows? From your medieval campaign. Do you record that?
Did you buy those quarrels? Did you purchase them at the market?
Every person I've ever met who plays a ranger in a game says their character is whittling quarrels every time they're at camp and arrows, so that they don't have to count their arrows and spend for it. Every single one of them, and the ones who know they're in a game where those things actually matter will actually take the repair skill so they can say they're using the repair skill to make those arrows. Every player I've ever met who plays in a fantasy game is trying to escape the mechanic of tracking the arrows for their bow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's annoying. It's just one of those banal things of life. Like, do I have enough quarters to go to the laundromat? That's effectively what it's like, except for, okay, now the dragon can kill you because you've run out of arrows.
See, now Sunset Sam's just trying to beard the lion. He's asking if he can do fancy and magic with the economy system.
Yes.
Yeah, actually.
Why don't you work that out and send us a treatise? We'll take a look at it.
You don't even have to. If you go back to the Pulp Toolkit from several years back, they actually discuss alchemy, which is fancy and magic. Anything that is alchemy is effectively fancy and magic in Savage Worlds.
Well, and I think there's an aspect to this that we see a lot of these abstract mechanics, like the cinematic ammo, the extras ammo, etc. But there's a lot as well in gaming today that is just still part of the game because it's always been part of the game. No one gets rid of experience points, despite the fact we've got now a system in Savage Worlds where we don't track levels. We don't have things we automatically get anymore, but we're still tracking experience points for whatever reason. We're still tracking bullets and money because in the 1970s in D&D there was an entry that your character got 50 gold pieces, and here are the things he could buy with that 50 gold pieces. I think there's a lot of stuff like that because it's always been done, gamers feel like it can't be changed.
Right.
And
well, to add to that, Dave, the idea that every character starts with 500 credits at character creation instead of what they should have. We were kind of discussing this in the green room. Okay, my character concept is I'm a small town deputy sheriff. And the GM goes, okay, well, you got $500. You need to buy your uniform, your hat, your gun, your badge. And as a player, I go, what? I said I'm a small town deputy sheriff. Yeah, well, you got 500 to spend. You don't start with that shit.
Why?
So if I start with what I should based on concept, why the hell do I have a shop? Why do I have to go on a shopping spree?
Try to actually make a character that has any kind of a handgun plus equipment, and you can't do it.
Why?
Even some of the cheapest handguns eat that entire 500 before you.
Yeah.
Same.
I see people have I've had a lot of people who I've introduced to Savage Worlds, and that's one of their main things they always say. Like if they're playing a fantasy setting and they're a fighter, like I can't even afford armor and a weapon.
I'm just sitting here thinking, why is it if an average kind of run-of-the-mill NPC just has regular clothes, why isn't that just standard loadout? I'm not talking about armor. I'm not talking about weapons. Yeah, I'm like,
I've never required people to buy clothes.
What kind of?
But it's listed.
It's listed. You can buy clothes. That should be. All right, man. If you want to streamline this, you get regular clothes. You can start out with a basic piece of leather armor. You can get 1 strength plus D4 weapon. And if you don't want to go any further, you're good to go. Like in some of my games, I will just automatically give the characters a loadout. This is what you have based off of the concept you told me.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, but you mean to tell me I can't get a long bow? You said you were a barbarian.
So, I mean, not to throw D&D under the bus here for a moment, but D&D actually went away from that model in 4th edition. In 4th edition, there was the Adventurer's starting kit. Everybody started with leather boots and gloves and riding pants. And I mean, there was a whole list of stuff that your character started with for free. It wasn't a go buy the Adventurer's pack for 50 gold and you get all this stuff. No, it was assumed your character started with all of it. But unfortunately, because 4th edition was so poorly received, that step forward that the system had made got thrown out baby with the bathwater when they threw out everything in 4th edition that was any good because of the fact that there was so much that the fans hated about 4th. They didn't look at any of the things that might have actually been a nice step forward for the system. Mm-hmm. So even D&D tried to break out of this model of, okay, here's your starting stipend of money that's not enough to pay for anything. Start your character off as a traveling adventurer mercenary. Unless you literally want to play Luke Skywalker, who shows up in a milky white tunic and a busted up land speeder with no blaster, no weapons, 2 droids his uncle paid for and are part of the narrative, you're not going to make a character that starts with anything. A pitchfork, maybe?
Good point.
Just give everyone has a pitchfork. You have a tunic and a pitchfork, and you will kill all the wild cards. Oh.
So I mean that's just what I wanted to throw out there. That with Savage Worlds trying to bring it down to a level of verisimilitude and track all that just doesn't fit with the philosophy and design of Savage Worlds, where everything is kind of abstracted. I think you don't think you're going wrong in having a go-between. Like if you want, for example, if you want to just add some drama, anybody who draws a 2 of clubs on a combat card, weapon malfunction. You just pull the trigger and there's no bullet in there. Yeah, because you weren't tracking your ammo. You weren't paying attention. Right.
I think they actually have that in Weird Wars Vietnam, the Tour of Darkness book. With that said, though, another thing you could look at in this regard is if you absolutely positively feel like you have to have something to give to the players. Maybe you're playing a cyber run, type of cyberpunk Shadowrun-esque game where there's supposed to be these big payouts. Do those payouts in permanent bennies. Here's an extra benny that your character gets until they spend it. It doesn't regenerate. You don't get it every session. But here's a benny. You just keep track. You have that many extra bennies you've earned, and those don't go away. You can just carry them over. Because when we did our Mafia game, one of the things the players could do was if they earned enough money in game, they could turn that into an immediate benny as needed to apply. And that mechanic was something everyone in that game enjoyed, because it meant that the money their characters were naturally coming into through the course of, sticking up banks or robbing drug dealers had an immediate way of having an impact in the game without being something they had to minutially track how many dollars and cents they spent on the last cup of coffee.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, I would say if worst comes to worst, if you need to track that sort of thing, or you want that in your game for that level of tension, you're best served by making it a social conflict, kind of like redo the social conflict rules, or oh, it's a streetwise dramatic task to find a hookup that can give everybody in your group new identities, alter egos, secret identities with papers that are forged. This whole thing, well, I'm going to go buy it. Well, how do you? Just handle it as a streetwise role with levels of success. I mean, it's really the simplest way to do it.
That's how I did it. I ran a Cyberpunk game for AetherCon, and pretty much, if I gave everybody a standard loadout, you had your basic gear, like your clothing. You had either a toolkit, a handgun, or a low-level D4 melee weapon. Like, you didn't get a lot of mad gear because, all right, so I'll get back to my free-for-all in a minute rant, but pretty much Cyberpunk, you can't have all this fantastic technology. That's just superheroes and sci-fi. Pretty much dropped it down, lower levels, starting gear below the limit that you could have. The players could not afford it. I said, you can't afford to get anything at all unless you pass some streetwise rolls. And they were able to pass them. And I said, okay, because Savage Worlds works in such a way, your melee weapon or your handgun, you can bump it up one die type. Your D4 weapon went to a D6. Your D6 handgun went to a D8 because you found something better, but not ridiculous.
Right. Well, and it's almost just too, if you want to talk about a resource mechanic, a buying mechanic, shopping mechanic, it's really already in the rules, kind of built in and baked in as the connections edge.
Yep.
Spend in advance, take the connections edge, and somebody, a guy. Oh, we need a car. Hey, I know a guy who can get us a hot car that nobody can trace. Let me give him a call. It's already baked into the rules as an edge. Dave looked like it was. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dustin.
I was going to say, why is it so people are so hesitant to take the driving skill or the ace edge or whatever? People just don't want to be the driver, and a lot of times you will need a driver.
Yeah.
Why don't
they should go watch? They should go watch the movie Baby Driver.
Whoever has the highest driving skill gets a vehicle for free, with the requirement that they're in debt for it.
Well, why do they have to be in debt for it? Just out of curiosity.
I wouldn't even make them in debt. If your character has the ace edge, I'm assuming you have a vehicle to go with it. I'm not the ass that goes, oh, you're the pirate ship captain. Now give me an edge or take a hindrance to pay for the pirate ship. No, we're playing a goddamn pirate game. You've been elected captain. You have a ship.
Right.
You're
it's
the
like
guy with the ace edge. You've got a fighter plane or a speedboat or a car or something that goes with that edge.
So I'm going to say this. If somebody takes the driving skill, whoever has the highest driving skill, if you're the GM, just give them a van.
Well, I would say this too. So, like, okay, for example, I've got a character who's a smuggler in a space opera who has an incredibly high piloting role and a lot of persuasion and connections. No, I'm going to make him go on an adventure and buy the Millennium Falcon. No, fuck that. He starts the show with the Millennium Falcon. And then come up with an interesting narrative about how he got it. Oh, I won it in a gambling.
Starts the show. He starts the game with the broken Millennium Falcon that has no guns, or it has one gun that's locked to the forward position. They don't start with the best of the best, but they start with something manageable that actually lets them play the game. When I say the pirate captain starts with a boat, yeah, but it's probably a schooner. He's not starting with a frigate or a ship of the line. That's what they have to go earn by playing the game. But something that came up in chat was between Carlin Kendrick and I believe Sunset Sand. They were talking about, that if you're buying clothes for your character, it's likely something specific, like a fancy outfit for T and L5R or the enemy's uniform. And I disagree, because the entry in the book is normal clothing, then fancy clothing. There's actually a separate entry for when you're buying those specific things. There's still an entry in there, because there's always been an entry in there for that normal clothing package. It is assumed that the characters, by the rules, actually have to purchase everything they have out of that $500 and that they're going to earn the rest through play. And it's just an old mechanic that needs to die.
It doesn't make any sense. Just give them a standard loadout, folks. Just give them a D4 strength plus D4 weapon and regular clothes, and then say, okay, now buy what you want.
Well, okay, you brought this up too, Dusty. You're playing Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Now, here's something that Dave brought up when we were doing our genre series that the rest of the hosts just would not concede to. And here it is. Cybernetics are advances.
They're superpowers.
They're edges.
Yeah.
They're edges.
They're edges. They're advancements in skill points. Your
tripped.
advances are you bolted something on.
My players, when they were in the Cyberpunk game, cybernetics, if you were an augmented human, that was weird science. I said, you have to treat it like weird science, and if it fritzes out, you take damage or you take fatigue. And we were running, and we had two street samurais fight one another in a duel, and one of my street samurais, who was, the rival, crit failed. I'm like, okay, his arm locks up, and the player capitalized, and he just wailed on that guy.
And
that's what happens. Yeah, because it's just weird science.
Yeah, weird science makes sense if you're talking about, like, they got a gun built into the arm, or they've got the smite power. But I would still say, they take that D4 to a D6 and notice, and that's a skill upgrade to the wires they have in their head that operate their cybernetic eye. It's not even that they just got better at looking for clues. It's they went out and slotted something in that makes them better in that manner. But when I suggested that to the panel, because it's always been, no, there's a cybernetic system. There's stuff you have to buy with both money and XP and time. The other guys just could not relent to say that was a good idea, because it was that bridge too far. And I think that's the crux of this, is when we get to a point where everybody is not playing a mechanic, encumbrance.
So I want to bring something up to you.
Too far to change it.
I want to bring something up. If you look at Deadlands Hell on Earth, if you look at any number of the Savage settings that come from Pinnacle themselves, there is a clear line between someone who takes a cybernetic augmentation and someone that becomes a cyborg. There's a line of demarcation. And if you are like a hardcore GM and you really want to go this route, for people who just take cosmetic or basic augmentations, make it a weird science. But if they want to go full conversion Borg, if they want to go, Lieutenant Murphy RoboCop, look at Harrowed. And instead of having a Manitou drawing them out and making them cruel, just make it that fight for humanity. Like, they've lost so much of themselves that they can't think of anything. The machine is the Manitou at that point. Make that the case. All right. If Pinnacle is working on this right now, and if they watch this, put the Harrowed, the basic rules for making a Harrowed, in Savage Worlds Black, because it is great for cyborgs. It is great for vampires. It is great for any number of characters that are struggling for humanity and have to deal with the concept of humanity versus power.
So I can tell you right now, it's not going to happen, because
it's not going to happen. But I'm going to cross my fingers.
Sci-fi companion. They're not going to put something in the core rules that undoes what they did with the sci-fi companion. I mean, let's just be honest.
I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna tell you this. I gotta say, anybody who loves Pinnacle and loves the Savage Worlds, you should pick up, maybe not Deadlands Reloaded, maybe you should pick up Deadlands Noir, because that's my favorite version of the Harrowed. That's my favorite version of the Harrowed, is in Deadlands Noir. But look at how they treat that type of character. if you're a vampire and you've got that sort of like you're kind of weird, you have the negative charisma, you have the craving for blood. Swap out meat for blood. You can heal yourself over time if you get blood. If you're in a sci-fi setting and you're destroyed, you just swap out meat for repairs and metal and resources or widgets or whatever. It can be done. It's one of the things that you can really hack the system with.
Well, and I think therein lies the rub, as you're saying, hack the system. And I think that's once you get to a point where you're doing stuff like grabbing the Herald out of Deadlands and then making it work for, creating RoboCop, you've gotten to a point where you understand the mechanics of Savage Worlds well enough. You probably don't even need to watch the show anymore. Right. I mean, most of the time, the questions that we're answering on here are a step beneath that. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
So, for example, like Savage,
doing that and run into something very specific, or they aren't to a point where they're gonna make that Herculean jump to go, oh wait, I can take this and abstract it and twist it entirely, rename it, and throw it out as something else.
Right, like Savage Ram states, how many bennies have a allied extra? None. Just bennies.
Yeah, the GM starts with a one Benny per player, and every time a wild card for the GM comes into play, that wild card has 2 additional bennies. And the GM can spend the GM bennies on those wild cards, but they can also just spend them on the extras at any time that the GM wants. But the wild cards bennies that come with them can only be spent for that wild card.
But he's talking allied extras. So he's talking, we're playing Weird Wars 2, and you give each player an extra soldier. Soldiers that they're now playing get bennies.
No.
And the answer to that is no. As rules per written, they don't.
No,
I would say
we just recently went through this with Jared's Friday night game. If you've got a player who misses a session and they're being run by the party as an allied extra, they absolutely get their bennies.
Right, because they're a wild card.
Otherwise, that player
right. But I think he's just asking allied extras.
Injured and couldn't soak wounds, despite being a wild card.
Right. I mean, you could always import. I mean, if it works for your game, you can always just say, hey, house rule. Anybody playing an allied extra, your wild card can share the bennies with that allied extra.
And that's actually, I think there's an edge in one of the settings that does exactly.
Bond. Yeah. Leadership edges let you do it too. So if you're playing a military campaign where you're assigned a soldier, it makes sense to go, okay, you're in charge of that soldier. You let them share your bennies. If the player wants to share their bennies with the allied extra, I wouldn't say no.
Leadership
but
edges.
Rules is written. Yep. The answer is none, because they're not a wild card. Period. End of story. Move on.
If it comes to a point where your GM feels the need, the GM could actually introduce an allied wild card, leave it just like an allied extra at the control of the players, but it has all the rules of a wild card. It gets the wild die, it gets the Benny pool, the whole 9 yards. And when player X at the table role plays that allied wild card's hindrance, the allied wild card gets another Benny. I mean, it's not a leap too far to say, here's how the rules work. Just apply that to an allied wild card is the same way you would another player.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I threw my topic out there. Who's next?
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I would say that if you have a group of 4 extras combined that are under your control, say in a military game, and you are sort of leading a squad, treat the group of extras like they're a wild card. Like a single wild card.
You mean add a group wild die?
Yeah. Like say, if there are...
I'm going to tell you right now, here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going, because I've tried doing that in our zombie game.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't work right with combat rules. You need to run each individual NPC for combat as their own attack.
So 2 things. 1, rules is written. There already is for a group of extras, they get a group die when they do anything. They make one roll with a group die.
As long as it's not combat.
That's already in there, and it has the very specific stipulation. This is for non-combat purposes. Like if it's a group of technicians you've hired to repair the car, they get to make a wild die or group die roll where they're going to roll their skill plus a wild die. That said, in combat, where it becomes an issue is now you've just said these 3 extras can all take direct damage themselves, but they only attack together. And it's going to lead to 2 things. 1, fewer attacks that are going out, and the attacks that do go out are more powerful because you're having to give them that extra die on top of everything that's going to lead to more raises. It's going to lead to more damage on attacks that actually hit, and there's going to be more attacks that hit because of those bonuses. Especially when you consider they're already generating a gang up bonus. So now you've just said this group of 4 guys that's part of your military unit runs up, they get a +4 for gang up, and because of you're probably standing there with them, so they're going to +4 for a gang up, and then on top of it, you're giving them a wild die. All of a sudden, instead of 4 extras, you've got a single wild card now extra attacking. There's going to be more hits, more damage. It's going to shift the game. That's one of those understanding of the mechanics and the way they weave together that just doesn't work with combat the way you would think it would.
Yeah, it sounds great for expediency. Say, hey, let's speed this up. I'm just there extras. I'll just make one roll. It'll be a group die with a wild die. We'll move on. But yeah, it doesn't work.
It's so much easier to pick up a fistful of dice and roll all their attacks at once.
Yeah, like you would with a suppressive fire, automatic fire.
Similar, but just like one of the tricks I do at the table, if I've got Group A and Group B, and they've split and they're attacking 2 different players, I grab blue dice for Group A and red dice for Group B and throw them all on the table. That way, there's not even confusion as to who actually got hit by that attack. You can immediately separate those out. I've made one roll, but it was 6, 8 dice, whatever it took to get it done.
Right.
Okay.
All right, Dustin, you said you had something.
Oh, that was it.
I thought you were going to go on a cyberpunk
topic.
Oh, a rant on cyberpunk?
Well, not necessarily a rant, but topical.
Oh my gosh. So, let's talk about genres for a minute there. What exactly makes a genre a genre? I think that cyberpunk has suffered greatly in that it forgot what punk was. It forgot that sort of gutter trash, abject poverty. Let's wear what's available. Let's be angry at the world and let's struggle to survive. Because a lot of the cyberpunk I'm coming across nowadays is technologically based superheroes. So speaking from the level of genre, cyberpunk had more to do with film noir from the 1930s and 40s, in that a disenfranchised generation was writing about struggling against society. And what I feel happened is, in both cases, the premise, first in noir, of the sort of broken detective against the system, and then later the runner against the oligarchy, became fantastical. So you went from Sam Spade to Columbo, and then you went from Neuromancer to Orphan Black. We developed superheroes, and I think that's sort of an American mentality, is to always develop into superheroes.
See, I disagree.
Okay.
But I disagree because I think you're missing the terminology too much. Cyberpunk is rooted very much in the punk ideal, and the punk ideal was raging against society. It took the form of, we're going to wear whatever we can find, we're gonna, you know, do these things that are outside of the norm, the contrarian aspect.
Anarchy, right?
But it wasn't, and not necessarily anarchy, but it was contrarian to the system that exists at the time. The system during the, you know, late 70s and the 80s, when cyberpunk really saw its skyrocketing thing, was this idea of a future that was dystopian because commerce had run away with the world. That, you know, this idea that communism and socialism lost the battle, and there was this entire world built on who had more money and could buy what they wanted.
All the megacorps.
The punk aspect of that was to put all of that in the negative, and the positive was this: we don't have anything, we're dirt poor, we're outside the system.
Right.
The modern day society has had 20, 30, 40 years now almost to shift, and we don't have that same standard. There's a lot more people today who are pushing for, you know, the healthcare reforms, and there's a lot more things, you know, they're talking about free internet for everybody and a free cell phone provided by the government. Well, at that point, you can't be outside the system when everyone's getting something for free. So that's where that mismatch is instead of going a different direction with the punk, they've just added the modern technological aspect to what you're seeing, but they're still portraying a punk against a society that existed 40 years ago versus a punk against the society that exists today.
All right, let me throw something out there then. Just for throwing a spanner in the works. Is diesel punk the antithesis to cyberpunk?
No.
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 Are they just aesthetically challenged?
Diesel punk is just a different flavor of the same ideal of there's an established type of society that your character is a rogue within that society. That's the whole idea of the something punk genre, is that your rage against the machine of whatever the machine is in your game. You know, whether it's a, you know, Sky Captain of the World Tomorrow and you're the pirates. Whether it's the oligarchies and the megacorps, and you're the one good cop on a dirty, you know, in a dirty department. You've got to be the contrarian, and the players have to take up the role of the contrarian in a punk game, or it fails to be punk. And I think that's what gets lost in translation, is so many people don't realize that's the root of it. Just like, you know, the whole Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Everyone loses the fact that the monster is Frankenstein, the doctor.
Not the monster.
The creation is the victim that goes on and suffers through all these, you know, very much a hero's journey of constant, you know, sorrow.
Well, I think too that when you start talking about diesel punk, steampunk, cyberpunk, it's the word itself takes on its own meaning at a certain point as a derivative of a genre or flavor or trapping. So in my mind, not being a big cyberpunk enthusiast and not being very deep into the whole movement as a literary movement, when I hear somebody say cyberpunk, I picture, okay, The Matrix. It's about high-tech superheroes.
Yeah, Johnny Mnemonic.
That's what
I think too. That's why I haven't really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just either one. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt. What?
I was just saying. That's kind of why I'm sitting here kind of quiet, because I'm like, you know, cyberpunk. That's not my thing. So I'm not really into that genre.
Right.
Okay.
So I mean, so what I'm just saying is that I think that at this point in time, the quote unquote thing that you're seeing, Dustin, with all cyberpunk is devolved in gaming into computer mechanized cybernetic superheroes, and that's the kind of games that are being run. I don't necessarily disagree. I just think that's become the genre trope. Just like, if you're going to run a pulp game, what is pulp genre? Well, it's a collection of tropes that we all iconically recognize as shorthand for storytelling.
Right.
Like heroes never die in a pulp series. Yeah, Indiana Jones falls off a bridge. Oh, there's no way he could have possibly escaped it, except as the audience, we all know that when he comes back 2 scenes later, okay.
Yeah, he's fine.
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm going
the
to throw
story
this
we're
out here.
telling.
If you're going to do a Cyberpunk Savage Worlds game, consider looking at Deadlands Noir and consider everyone having the poverty hindrance, because Noir and Cyberpunk are related.
Oh, absolutely. They come from
yeah.
the same that same downtrodden point of view.
They share aesthetics and
the
storytelling.
world
Right?
is always dark and grim in those things. Look at
in both.
The closest thing we have to a proper cyberpunk in current kind of pop culture would be The Matrix, because there again, yeah, sure, you've got these characters that are ultra powerful inside the Matrix, but they're not, because the people they're up against are even more powerful. And oh, by the way, it's a grim, gritty world where half the characters are going to die and things are going to go wrong in the worst possible way. That's a flavor that's constant through that. And if you don't have that, you lose the whole aspect of the punk part of that, whether it's, you know, computer punk, cyberpunk, steampunk, diesel punk. I mean, you want a great diesel punk? Go rewatch Waterworld as a diesel punk story.
Yep.
The guy who doesn't use diesel, the guy who won't use gas, the guy who doesn't need it. He's outside this system.
Right. So would you call Mad Max diesel punk?
You know what? I'm going to throw this out there. I think Mad Max could be diesel punk. It's just a matter of, you would have England as the empire. Max could still be in Australia, but it's just a colony, and they can't get the resources from the empire that they need. It could absolutely be run as a steampunk or diesel punk setting, because post-apocalypse is just hazards and resources. Watch Mad Max.
I think you're changing it quite a bit to make it fit. I think that when, as soon as we go, well, you can just do this thing and this thing that changes what Mad Max was to fit being in a punk thing. You absolutely can do that. I mean, take anything you want. You can turn it into, you know, Star Wars could be a punk because it's the little rebellion that's outside the system fighting the man. But it's a bit of a leap to go from space opera to space punk. With that said, though, I think, again, don't get hung up on the aesthetic. You know, just because we're talking about cyberpunk where you've got the megacorps, you could also go the other direction and do something that celebrates the megacorps, and that the megacorps are fighting the corruption of the government, and tell a completely different story that's got nothing to do with punk, but is set in the same kind of a world. And it'll have a very different feel.
Atlas Shrugged. If you read Atlas Shrugged, then spoiler alert, okay, write this down for your history report or your literature report. In Atlas Shrugged, John Galt organizes the heads of industry and says, we're going on strike. You know, the world is turning into a socialist regime. Everybody that runs a company just comes to Galt's Gulch, and we'll just wait it out. And sure enough, when everybody that's like a major economic power leaves, and the whole system is based around feelings and not production, it falls apart.
Well, and you could say this. What was it? The biblical King Solomon reference. There's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
There is nothing new, and anything you're watching is a reimagination, a reskinning, a retrapping of something, or 2 or 3 things that already exist. I mean, if you're a fan of Shakespeare, you can take a look at a lot of Disney films and go, "Oh, it's Hamlet. The Lion King is Hamlet. Oh, look, there's Scar's the evil uncle that killed the king. Blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, you can always talk about influences. You could always take the Robin Hood story, plot by plot point and just set it in the future with cyberpunk trappings and run a campaign.
I'm going to throw something out there. Sons of Anarchy is Hamlet with motorcycles.
Sure, why not?
Instead of a ghost, it's his father's journal.
Yeah. I mean, take what you love. I mean, did George Lucas create something new? Yeah. Yeah, because he combined certain things in a blender and hit puree, if that's how you want to talk about something new. He didn't create anything that didn't already exist. He just kind of retrapped it and recombined it in an interesting and compelling way. And do the same thing. Steal liberally as a GM, I guess is the point we're making. If there's a story that you're intimately familiar with and you love, steal it. Steal it. Change a few of the names, file off the serial numbers, give it a new coat of paint in a different world of setting, and run that shit.
Well, I think an interesting aspect of this is we paint ourselves into corners that we have to do things a certain way because someone else did it that way.
Right.
Yep.
I saw a lot of conversation leading up to the movie Bright coming out on Netflix, where everybody was talking about it as if it was Shadowrun. And come to find out, no, it was just someone who took their D&D adventure and said, what happens if all these races existed in 2017?
Right.
And all of a sudden you've got, well, the orcs used to be bad and used to follow the Dark Lord, so they suffer racism. And, oh, look, there's fairies that are absolutely, positively the little pixie fairy, and they're as annoying as we all think they are, and they get stuck in the bird feeder. I mean,
right?
Someone just took their average D&D fantasy game and threw it into 2017 and said, well, what would that look like? And it's gotten so much of a following. It's already got a sequel greenlit, the whole 9 yards.
I'm sorry, but Netflix has the only thing worth watching nowadays. Like, like South Park makes this joke. It's like, hello, Netflix, you're greenlit. I'm like, no kidding. Just make something. Just stop making the same dad blasted show over and over again. Somebody calls you up with an original idea. You say yes.
Well,
no, only if you're Netflix. I mean, come on. They're bringing back freaking Roseanne.
Yeah. Listen, here's the thing about Netflix. I'll just kind of go off on a slight topic here. It's not the network studio system. Therefore, yeah. They go, you want to do what? Sure. How much of a budget do you need? We can do that. And then they get the hell out of the way of the creative people and don't min-max manage them and go, well, wait, we're investing a lot of money in this. We got to make sure we get a return on our investment. So we tested this. For now, yeah. For now.
Well, I mean, not everything. I mean, they've had their share of canceled shows.
They did, but they had those shows that no one would ever make.
Right. Like Marco Polo. Which got
like, that is a great. It's
not a great concept, but very niche audience.
Make a game out of it. My gosh, you are exploring the new world.
Well, look at just the idea, though, of taking something new and doing something radically different than anyone expects, and how rare it is. And I'm not just talking about Netflix. I'm talking about even with the Savage Worlds. You know, how many superhero games have been released now for Savage Worlds? How many pulp era adventure styles have been released? How many horror have been released? Who's actually gone off and blazed their own brand new trail and done something completely new? I mean, not to throw Chris and company under the bus, but even the pirate thing had been done twice, and great success, and it's a great product. But even that wasn't blazing a new trail. Very few people are doing something that no one's seen before, and when people do, there's a backlash from the fans that is, I don't want to try that. It's not like anything I've ever played. It doesn't. I don't want to try it to find out if it's fun.
I'm gonna go ahead.
It's hard to find something new.
I'm gonna go out on a limb. And Scott, if you're with us in spirit, don't get mad. but I know exactly what he would say. He'd say, "Man, everybody just tries to remake Lord of the Rings."
Well,
And
okay, and let's ask
right.
why. Let's ask why. Because that shit's successful and
Right.
makes fucking money. So
Oh, yeah.
let's back up a second. Creativity, creating something brand new that's never existed before.
Hard fucking work.
It is.
Congratulations. You should be applauded and lauded if you've come up with something that is innovative, fresh, and never been done before. However, if you mortgage your house to do it, you're a fucking idiot.
And good luck trying to find that one.
Yeah. And
that
oh my
one
God.
firework out there.
Yeah, and oh my God, did you fucking get lucky?
Yeah, sailed under the star at the right fucking time that you captured an audience for this thing that no one had ever heard of. Right. Because convincing all those people to play something they've never heard of.
Right. So I understand why the machine turns out the same dribble and drobble that it always does, with some very slight differences and tweaks, because they're following established formula that has made money in the past over and over and over again. I can't fault NBC for not doing Bright. I can say I understand why Netflix does Bright, because, well, shit. Okay, we stream. We started off with just DVD rentals in the mail. Let's remember that about Netflix. Their cornerstone of the market was direct to your mailbox blockbuster. Yeah, that was their model. Then they went, okay, we need to expand and come up with a new revenue stream. Internet streaming. We're going to have to invest a lot of capital in server and all this other stuff, but then we could do it, and that became successful. So now they're like, okay, so we could either license all these streams, or wait a minute, hold on a second, we can start creating our own content to fill in the gaps we can't get licensing. It's a natural progression, but somehow they're getting blessed and kissed in as, patrons of the arts and innovators of this and that. Come on, people.
Well, to go along with the idea, though, that everybody jumps on the success train, I remember 2 years ago and last year, a couple weeks before Christmas, Star Wars hits, and all of a sudden, my feed is flooded with people asking, how do you do Star Wars with Savage Worlds? Uh-huh. I guarantee you there's people out there right now trying to Savage Bright. Because
yes.
It was interesting. And we will likely see a Bright setting hit the books at some point in the near future.
We already have Fable Hunters. Okay, big shout out to Tricky Troll Games, who have released some micro settings. Pretty good stuff. They released Fable Hunters. And Fable Hunters came out before Bright did. So go check that out, folks.
Okay, well, let's talk Savage Worlds real quick. How hard would it be to do Bright? Oh, let's see. All I need is a core rule companion, because there's already orcs in there as a race.
Oh, it's simple.
There's already elves in there as a race. There's already magic. I'm done. I can just pick up core and start running Bright today.
6 months ago on the Facebook page for Savage Worlds, I put a question up there. What are the core fantasy races you want to see in a modern or future fantasy game? And I got so much shit that you would never, ever, 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 ever use elves and orcs in a modern or future setting, that was sci-fi and it damn well better be aliens. And then Bright came out and kicked all your fucking asses. It's not hard. It's just one of those things you have to be willing to take that extra step and go, where could we go that's a little different? It doesn't have to be a lot different. It doesn't have to be a blaze your new trail. It's take the thing that you're doing now and step off 2 degrees to the right or left and just keep going.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what's so innovative about Bright? Let's break that down for just a second. Okay, so there's orcs. So what? Just another, basically, we're talking in LA, so they're just a slightly meaner LA street gang, essentially.
Yes.
That are a little bit savage, tribal, with their mysticism.
They were all pretty, pretty buff.
Yeah.
They weren't strong. Quite if you look at actual Savage Worlds rules, the orcs are quite a bit larger than humans. In Bright, they weren't quite that much bigger, but they were certainly bigger.
They had the brawny edge, man. They had the brawny edge with the outsider hindrance.
Well, and think about this too. I think also the creators of Bright go, wow, I really, really regret that Alien Nation got canceled off Fox in the 90s.
So it actually, if anyone remembered Alien Nation in chat.
Because when I see Bright, I'm like, this is Alien Nation with orcs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And fair. Instead of
I
aliens.
remember having that conversation with you a few weeks ago about it being Alien Nation with orcs.
I liked Alien Nation.
So, I mean, it plays on a lot of the same tropes. It plays on the same tropes, like the guy that gets the partner he doesn't want to be partnered with. I mean, goddamn. Okay, we want to talk about Bright being inventive and creative. Really? How many times have I seen that fucking trope?
You know, like Almost Human came out about a year or so ago. You know what? It's not necessarily that it's creative. It's just that someone took the chance. Just roll your dice, folks. Come on. Just come up, like, go home and think of something absolutely insane. You know what? Maybe, like, I don't know, fairies as park rangers.
I got an idea for you. I'm going to release a Savage World setting called Dim, and it's just like Bright, except it takes place in the Old West.
You know,
That's the only difference. Yeah. Instead of modern day LA, it's 1868 frontier Western with orcs and fairies.
We got Deadlands, the original, because somebody was watching horror films and Westerns in the same night and thought, you know what, this is a great idea.
Yeah, well, that's Shane Hensley going, oh, I love Fistful of Dollars and a few dollars more than the good, bad, the ugly. If only there were zombies. Hey, wait a minute.
I mean, let's be honest. That's kind of brilliant if you break it down.
Well, I mean,
the best ideas are simple. I mean, like Dave said, it's putting the 2-degree twist and shift and focus that makes it something that is fresh and new, or has the appearance of fresh and new.
I challenge you, dear viewers out there on the internet, rewatch Bright, but watch it beat for beat as if you were watching the original Lethal Weapon.
Yes.
Because it's the same story, beat for beat. The established good cop gets a partner they don't want, and the partner they don't want ends up the crux of the whole story going forward. And all the bad shit that happens to both of them throughout.
Yeah. Substitute huge cocaine shipment with magic wand.
Listen to me, man. It is the oldest story. It is the buddy cop story is literally the oldest story in history. Read the Epic of Gilgamesh. There's some asshole named Gilgamesh who's like top dog, and the gods are like, this guy's too hard to deal with. Let's get that wild man Enkidu out there, and they'll fight. And Gilgamesh whips his ass, and Gilgamesh looks at Enkidu and says, hey, man, I like you. Let's hang out. That's it. It's the oldest story in history.
Okay, so our free-for-all topics turned into a rant episode. Chris, anything you want to talk about as far as a topic, something that has been on your mind from the Savage Worlds community or Savage Worlds in general?
Well, I kind of, Carlin's very first comment up there kind of intrigued me a little bit. I never had thought about it.
And read it off.
Why can't extras take edges that give bennies like luck if extras don't get bennies? And I hadn't really thought about that, but I've seen a few extras and they have luck listed. So why would you waste an edge on an extra if it doesn't really benefit them?
I'm not sure that's rules as written.
Rules as written, they don't get bennies. And the GM cannot gain bennies through play. There is no mechanic in core. Mind you, I'm talking core, the deluxe book. There's no mechanic that awards the GM additional bennies. Now, there's some settings that do a whole lot of that.
And that's what he's saying. He's saying, why would you give them those edges when they don't even get bennies? No, it's like you're wasting.
Well, you're not supposed to give extras edges.
Me, if I'm creating the extras, I'm not going to give them an edge they can't take advantage of, and you're just supposed to give them the stuff that they get.
That they need. So maybe that's why.
Extra luck. Then when that extra comes into play, I get an extra GM benny.
Well, and I guess Jared's kind of right too, because basically, are extras supposed to have edges and hindrances, or because
Technically, by core, technically no.
I've seen tons of extras in different games all have hindrances and edges.
I have never once in any mechanical review of the game ever seen a rule that said extras can't have edges. In fact, every extra, every monster in the compendium,
Well, okay,
every
but
book has edges along with monstrous abilities both listed.
as special abilities, not as necessarily edges.
Yeah, but it's
I don't know. It just
edge works exactly like the edge.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying.
As a page reference back to the edge.
I understand what you're saying. The lion has two-fisted. I get it. But it's called a special ability, not an edge, to be technical.
I think that's just the heading on the character sheet. I don't think that's, there's nothing that says they can't have edges. And Carlin, I would say if you're running a printed product that has that, you are well within your right as a GM doing prep to remove luck and add an edge that more fits the tone, or to possibly add an extra Benny to that scene that the GM can spend. Not rules as written, but I would definitely do it.
I don't know. I feel like the difference between edges and special abilities is that there is no price paid for special abilities. They're just thrown in there because they should be.
Well, you don't spend character creation points to create extras either.
Extras by the rules, so you don't have to have the prereqs for anything.
Now, just from experience, would I give a mook extra any edges? No, I wouldn't. Would I give an allied extra who's supposed to be like a supporting cast member? Maybe.
I'd give
maybe
the occasional edge. Yeah. Like if I've got a group of mooks that are supposed to be, a SEAL team or a Marine fire team, they're gonna come in. They're gonna have marksmen. Right. They're gonna have that bonus to their shooting without having to actually use the aim maneuver.
But more than anything else, that's really just a GM note on an extra sheet about how to run those characters. Really, I mean, it's not right.
I think so. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's more of a kind of a guide,
right?
I mean, because looking in the book. I mean, under wild cards and extras, I mean, all it says is, let's see. These beings have a little better chance of doing things and a little tougher to put down and journey more detailed than the common guards. I mean, it's like he's collectively called extras. Right. I was just I wanted to see if it said anywhere in there.
I think the distinction comes down to extras and allied extras. That's really where the distinction comes down, because you track experience points for allied extras.
Right.
I don't know. At what point does an allied extra become a wild card?
Whenever you fucking feel like it. It's a GM. Whenever you decide, he's a wild card.
Whenever you feel like it, or whenever a player has a character die, and that player wants to continue playing in that moment, in that scene, via the extra is automatically upgraded to wild card. Just by virtue of being played by a player character, by a player that became a player character, it gets all the benefits of being a wild card.
Right, and I'll say this too. So if you look at core rules, there are no edges to be given to extras, quote unquote. When you take a look at the allied extra section, even the examples that the core rulebook gives only says 2 combat edges for an experienced soldier allied extra.
Right.
Yeah, because I'm looking right now at the what's it? I don't know what it's called. It's the one sheet in the back. Oh, the blood and the snow.
Okay.
And if you look at the troll raiders, there's 3 of them. They don't have any hindrances, but they have the brawny edge. The house guard, does not have any. Has the loyal hindrance and the brawny edge. So I mean, even in there, they're given edges to extras.
Yeah, but that's an oh god, it's a kind of an allied extra, right? It's an elevated extra.
Troll
That's
Raiders are not allied extras. Troll Raiders are the bad guys, and it specifically says hindrances, edges.
Mhm.
Right.
Special abilities. It doesn't. There's no dodge on this. It's edges in nice bold print. Like it would
Well,
be,
if you look at
you look at
the cane crewman in the next one.
Yeah.
The cane crewmen, they have edges and hindrances. They have frenzy.
Right.
I would
this
say
falls under the heading of build extras however you need to. Nowhere in the book does it say extras don't get edges or hindrances specifically. Nowhere in the book does it say they do get edges or hindrances specifically.
Well, wait a second. Is it possible that they divide it between conscious and unconscious? Like, say, something that's got animal intelligence, like a lion or a horse, would have special abilities, whereas someone like a soldier and a mage would have edges and hindrances?
Not necessarily. You take a look at the vampire.
If you look, special abilities are almost always monstrous abilities from the beginning of that section from the bestiary, rather than something that can be referred to as an edge. You know, if it's in the book as an edge, it's listed on the character sheet for the extra or the NPC of any kind as an edge. That said, I think where you have that difference is they absolutely can use those edges and monstrous abilities. I think the guideline for how the character should be played comes more from the hindrances.
Right.
Because again, the GM's not playing role-playing the extra to get another Benny. The GM just needs that earmark that, oh wait, this extra comes into play and has the one-eye hindrance and is mean. Or this extra comes in and is bloodthirsty and greedy. It gives you an idea of how to role-play that character in the scene. And it's really because everything in the bestiary is there for you to quickly grab it and add it to your game. The stuff that really matters is when you're running pre-written adventures. Again, Blood in the Snow, the USS Kane, or any other printed material where if this is written by somebody else, those are absolutely there as a guideline to give you an idea because you didn't create that character in that scene.
Right. It's crib notes. It's shorthand cheat sheet for the GM who's going to pick it up and run it because it's the simplest way to do it. To say, hey, look, this particular character is a greedy bastard. Role play him as such. The easiest thing to do is just go, hindrance is greedy. It automatically reads and translates to any GM picking it up and reading it. But more than anything else, it's a hey GM note more than like a character building mechanic from Savage Worlds.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, the old version of what was that? Crime City, I think it was, that had the red hand terrorists. Said that it used the Fanatics setting rule, and then it listed which of the extras had loyal, and that was an earmark for these are the guys that'll actually dive in front of that last hit to save the important characters.
Yeah, I would say if you're seeing that on extras in a pre-published setting or something, it's just a GM note for how the character.
Because I'll tell you that thinking about it in our book, they have edges and hindrances.
Right. Well, a lot of it too is if I'm gonna publish something, I'm gonna look at what's been previously published, and if that's the way that the characters are listed and it's been done in a published setting, I'm gonna do the same thing.
Right.
It's the monkey see, monkey do kind of aspect to human psychology. Like, oh, well, that's okay, that's acceptable to do because it's already done in another published product. I'm not ripping it off, but I'm seeing that as an example, so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. There's an example of that in the core book. But Dave's absolutely right. Extras don't earn bennies for roleplay because that benny would go to the GM. The GM does not have an opportunity to gain extra bennies.
Right. During an allied extra gain bennies for role playing. Though I would argue that you wouldn't necessarily be wrong to award them. But they can only be spent by the allied extra, not by the PC that's being run by that player.
Right.
If you've got a player who looks down and sees that an allied extra is supposed to be, curmudgeonly because they've got the mean hindrance and it's written in there curmudgeonly, and then they role play that, oh, that's Benny worthy, and then that extra has their very own Benny to spend. It's not rules as written, but I would absolutely award it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, I mean, technically, doesn't the GM role play the allied extras and the characters control their actions?
No, the GM only takes control of an allied extra in moments where it's dramatically important to the story. So, the player characters have the extra with them, and they walk into the coroner's office, and the GM knows in the notes for the adventure that this extra knows the coroner and can talk about their golf game, and it goes into a side tangent that gets a clue. That's what the GM can take over. But up until that point, it's 100% supposed to be the players choose not just the actions, but the role play of that character from scene to scene.
I think in a lot of cases, to sort of like drive the story forward or to let the player interact, if I have a player that's controlling an allied extra, I'll provide the voice for that allied extra. But I never step on them if they want to just take over and start putting the voice into that character. I just roll with it. I think that's the way that it really should be. But yeah, Dave, you're right. It is the player controls it to the letter. But a lot of times I think GMs will find that players kind of want the GM to sort of give them a back and forth banter.
Yeah. Jared, I know you're looking for it. It's page 72.
The allied extras. I just pulled it up.
I just remember reading it somewhere.
Yeah, it says, of course, the GM can always take charge of extras when the need arises, but with good role players, this should rarely be necessary.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about whether I just remember reading somewhere, maybe I got it in my head somewhere, that the players are in complete control of the allied extra's actions. Absolutely, the GM doesn't decide what the allied extra does. Necessarily, that's up to the players. But that the role play must be handled by the
that difference between what you're thinking and what it actually is. The GM can step in and take complete control or partial control at any time, but the players should otherwise have the responsibility of...
Hang on. Savage Worlds takes a very different approach. We turn control of allies over to player characters. The GM acts out these allies when they're spoken to, of course, and he should very rarely, if ever, take them over in combat.
In combat.
So there's your paragraph right there that the GM needs to
provide the role play.
When they're spoken to and things like that.
Okay.
That is in Allies. That is on page 125.
See, and I wonder if that's the way that's written when they're spoken to. I wonder if that's when they're spoken to by a player character. Because I know for myself, I am not going to do the GM thing of sitting there for 5 minutes having a conversation between NPC extra and allied extra. I'm going to have a conversation with myself in two different voices in front of the players. Not happening. I'll be committed, especially with my players.
Well, even that said, if I have no issue whatsoever with the players who are in control of the allied extra providing the role play either. I'm just trying to think what the core rule where I'd seen it somewhere and made that impression that it was a GM that did particular role play for the.
I think this is again one of those spots where there's a lot of portions of Savage Worlds that are either vaguely written or self-contradictory, just because. It's a necessity to write in an abstract game system.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Okay. Well, do we have anything else in the chat that we want to talk about? Want to address?
I'm about to be a pumpkin.
My Little Pony.
What?
Sunset Sam said he's too old for this shit.
We all are.
I'm about the pumpkin.
And Far Sniper 10,000 says My Little Pony.
Jared's already done it.
It's been done. I've run it before. It's easy.
There were a few pot shots taking it forth because I mentioned it earlier in the show, but I stand by saying there are good parts of 4th edition, just like there are a lot of bad. Just like there's good parts of D&D and bad parts of D&D, or good parts of Fantasy Flight Star Wars and bad. Every system has good and bad in it.
Yep.
All right.
Even Savage Worlds.
Even Savage Worlds. All right. Well, then on that note, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning saying for Chris, the Savage Mind Fox, Dave, the Rules Baby Scott, and Dustin, the Savage Intern, saying keep rolling and stay savage.